welcome to Global 360, the show produced by the Washington Diplomat, which for over 25 years has been serving the diplomatic community here in Washington, D.C. I'm your co-host, Anna Gawel. Want to introduce my fellow esteemed co-host, Eric Ham. Hi, Eric.
Hi, Anna. Hello, everyone. It's so good to be here, and I'm so excited about this topic, and I know you are, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say, because I know you got a lot to talk about.
And you know me very well, yes. Now, for those tuning in, this is actually not one of our live shows. We are pre-recording this at, it's getting to be 10 o'clock Friday night, which shows you what a big social life journalists have.
Yeah, just tell everyone we're nerds. Go ahead.
Complete nerds. We were super excited to do this too. But you know, it is Friday night, and it's actually the Friday night before the 20th anniversary of the September 11th attacks tomorrow, which is another reason why we felt it was important to get this show in. Obviously here the focus will be a bit more on Afghanistan, but of course I would be remiss not to mention a few things on 9/11. I think a lot of people don't know, Eric, you do know, my very first real job in journalism out of college, my first day was on 9/11. I was driving into first day on the job when I heard on the radio the first plane crashing into the Twin Towers. I was pulling in and getting into the office when news of the second plane hit, and we all unfortunately knew at that point it was not an accident. And you know, I don't have a personal connection in terms of I don't know anyone who died or was injured that day. But I do often think about that this was my first day working, and I was so excited. And I always imagine, you know, where there are people, some of the people there were earlier than maybe a 9 a.m. work day. They were there early. Maybe they were excited about something they were doing at work. And you know, I've since had the privilege of enjoying a 20-year career, whereas, you know, nearly 3,000 people that day no longer had that privilege. So I suppose in the years since, especially, you know, going back to Afghanistan, it felt like, you know, beyond being a student of the war on terror, as we all were, you know, to me, Afghanistan felt like, I don't want to say obligation, but a duty to really study and follow what we were doing in that country, how that war was going. Because obviously we have the nearly 3,000 people who died. We also have many other people who have died since in the war on terror, the soldiers, Afghan, Iraqi civilians, the Afghans and Iraqis who helped us during the wars there. So, you know, it always felt like I had always followed it for 20 years. It felt like a duty to do that. And I followed it, you know, starting from, you know, when it fell off the radar, starting with the Iraq war. I mean, very quickly it faded from our kind of collective attention, and then over the presidents up until recently. And so, you know, recently when we had this dramatic botched, there's all kinds of words for it, exit, you know, of course it has sparked the what ifs. For me, I think back, you know, Eric, you know, we've been talking about the election. I think it's safe to say at this point that President Trump did not in fact win the election, even though there's still some, unfortunately, large segment of the population still not quite there yet. But if we look back, a real contested election, that was with Al Gore and George W. Bush. And I often think about what would have been different if Al Gore had been president. You know, I do think that with the attack, there would have been in some kind of invasion of Afghanistan to root out Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. Would Al Gore have chosen to stay and nation build? I don't know. That's a difficult question. He knew what Somalia was like under Bill Clinton. At the same time, he always seemed like an idealist to me. I could see him trying to improve the country by staying. What I know for sure is that he would never have made the disastrous decision to go and invade Iraq. So of course, the what if is if we had not diverted all of our resources for Iraq from Afghanistan. But again, even that, I think, gets to this game of Monday morning quarterbacking that, all politicians and pundits do. And as I think is the case in so many complex crises, Afghanistan does not, it defies easy answers. And on the one hand, this whole time that I've written and read about Afghanistan, it was encouraging what was happening, but I admit, it's not a hindsight 2020 thing. I've always had this kind of feeling in the pit of my stomach that the gains were never going to be sustainable. It's not something I wanted to be right about, but it was always there over the last 20 years. On the other hand, I can always admit, I can sometimes admit when I'm wrong. I don't want to say always. In the wake of the exit, I wrote several of my own columns. I was personally very angry because I feel that evacuating the Afghans who helped us and who now are left behind with essentially a death sentence is a very sacred moral obligation that we have. And I was angry that when Biden announced he knew he was withdrawing by a certain date, that the special immigrant visas, the SIV, that they weren't sped up. Now, a lot of that, I will say, falls on former President Donald Trump. I don't agree with National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, who has said, nothing was done over the last year. That wasn't necessarily Trump's fault. That was the pandemic's fault because interviews were cut short for SIV applicants. But the 3 years before that, as you are well aware, the anti-immigration policies of this previous administration, the SIV applications slowed to an absolute trickle. I mean, we had a 3-year-long backlog because of the Trump administration. There still is a backlog with Iraqi interpreters who I don't know even have any kind of hope anymore. So I think we need to, when we talk about the SIV applicants, we need to look at President Trump's role. That being said, President Biden was in office for many months and did know he was also going to depart Afghanistan. I often defend the State Department because I feel like it's a misunderstood agency. There are a lot of good people that work there. But on this note, you may not be an expert, but it doesn't take 8 years to process a special commando who's been working side by side with Americans. It's unacceptable. It's inexcusable to me. I think though, after that initial kind of anger, I look at it and I think President Biden had some legitimate points about the evacuation. I don't know, his point that if they had begun evacuating much earlier, that would have caused this massive rush regardless. I don't know how true that is. I think the biggest thing I was wrong about was I was writing, if the Taliban get in the way, shoot them. You do whatever you have to do to get Americans and Afghans out of there. And I think that was a knee-jerk reaction, kind of an American cowboy reaction. I think Biden made the best of a bad hand that he had a hand in creating of cooperating with the Taliban. I think if he hadn't, there would have been bloodshed. I do not think you would have seen, and it is a huge number, over 120,000 people evacuated, majority of them Afghans. I think that's very important to point out. I think if there wasn't that cooperation with the Taliban, we wouldn't see those kind of numbers. I did question if he should have gone past the August 31st deadline. But again, I think if he had, the Taliban would have started shooting at American soldiers. And I don't know that Americans have the stomach for that. I admit, I kind of, when Biden consistently warned of ISIS attacks, I almost thought, was that an excuse for wanting to get out early? And clearly that was not the case. There was that urgency. There was the horrible attack that took the lives of 13 US service members and over 270 Afghans. I've heard from very, very intelligent people, why didn't we, open up Bagram, the airbase, and I fully think that the military did advise Biden that that was not the wisest course of action, because what most people don't realize, Bagram is about think 50 miles outside of Kabul. And I mean, that road would have been death row out if you had opened it. I mean, Bagram had been attacked for 20 years. So again, I think, you know, looking back, I think the way that Biden handled it was, again, not as bad as I thought initially. I think there's a lot of people that have come to that conclusion, seeing the numbers that we're able to get out. And I think we are seeing now, as much as you have this military bravado, let's go back in, we're seeing some quiet diplomacy. We've seen some people evacuated. It is not nearly close to the numbers of at-risk Afghans who remain in the country. But we do have significant leverage, financial leverage over the Taliban. And, you know, I just, at the end of the day, and I will finally wrap up, you know, I hear from the military, I don't claim to be a military expert, but you have to kind of agree with the average American when you hear the military say, if we only had more time, if we only had another year, another 5 months, another 5 years, that doesn't hold water after 20 years. It just doesn't. And I think for me, it comes down to the fact that the Taliban's most powerful weapon was always time. There's this famous saying by a Taliban commander. I could be wrong. It might have been an Afghan commando, but it was, the Taliban would say, you have all the watches, we have all the time. They would have waited us out if we were there for another 20 years. It's their country. It is an element of American hubris to think that we could have built the Defense Department in Kabul. It wasn't going to happen. And I think, you know, I know I've been quick with the historical comparisons to Vietnam, and it's a lot more nuanced than that, but you see the parallels of where the Viet Cong too, they had the time. They knew that the Americans would eventually not be able to stomach a 20 or 30-year war. And that was always going to move against us. And unfortunately, as much as Afghanistan is in the news, Eric, you and I both know we've got the infrastructure talks coming up. There's all kinds of things coming up. America tends to have a collective amnesia when it comes to foreign policy. So I don't know how much of Afghanistan, it certainly will be in the news for a long time. The Republicans will keep it in the news, and there needs to be an autopsy of what happened with the Biden administration. But I personally, I genuinely hope that we continue to try and get out at least some of the Afghan special forces that, you know, they're guaranteed a death sentence if they don't escape the country. I certainly pray that we continue to do that. But I go back to my original point. I don't really know what will happen. I think the only thing is, if anyone claims that they know anything of what will happen or about Afghanistan or what, they're wrong, because none of us truly know. Afghanistan is one of those conflicts where there are just absolutely no easy answers. That's, in 20 years of studying it, that's ultimately the biggest lesson I've learned. I'm done. I don't even know where to begin. What are your thoughts?
I think basically what I can sum up what you said in 2 words.
This is why you're a better analyst than me.
It's complicated. And listening to you speak about it, you spoke about the complexity of what we are seeing play out, because people are looking at this, and here is where people want to take this. They want to take 20 years and they want to put it in President Biden's lap and say, you are responsible for all of this. And he's not. And the problem is the mission in Afghanistan not only has changed from president to president, but the mission has changed several times, even within one presidency. And so President Biden recognized that when bin Laden was killed, it was time then to end the war in Afghanistan. But we also have to remember, Barack Obama simply did not have the stomach for the withdrawal, which was always going to be ugly.
Yeah.
And that's what is
Biden
taking
wanted.
place right now.
And what Biden wanted at the time as vice president. He did
Absolutely.
not support the surge.
Right. He did not. And so you're right. This came down to President Biden executing another president's agenda. But at the same time, what we have to recognize is the whole reason for going into Afghanistan was to capture or kill bin Laden and to cripple the organization that orchestrated 9/11. That mission was accomplished a decade ago. The problem is, because we have been there so long, we have forgotten the original mission of why the United States went into Afghanistan. So that mission was accomplished. There was no other reason to be there. And we also have to be clear-eyed about something else. You're right about those Afghans that supported the US effort in Afghanistan, and the United States should get them out. But also, just like, and I want to do a comparison here. Mm-hmm. We have had President Trump for 4 years. The media has become an infrastructure that was developed and designed to cover a circus. And so now we are attempting to cover a new president, a new commander-in-chief, like we covered the circus. The United States has been at war all of the 21st century. The United States is now making a pivot. The State Department, almost my entire adult life, for the first time, is now taking the lead role on US foreign policy. Because for 20 years, the military and US hard power has taken the lead on US foreign policy. That is changing now. And I think what you're seeing is not only a media landscape, but a policy landscape that does not know what that looks like, and they don't know what that means. And so when we say now this is in the hands of the diplomats, that scares an entire country, because for 20 years, we have led with guns and bombs, and now we're not. And look, this administration has made clear they don't trust the Taliban, they don't recognize the Taliban, but we have to give them credit. Not only did the Taliban become our ally in helping the US withdraw from Afghanistan, but we have just seen this week planes begin to leave from Afghanistan with both Americans and Afghans. And so there are those who now believe that the United States does not hold leverage or does not have leverage over the Taliban. What we need to recognize is the Taliban wants credibility as a governing body, but also the Taliban wants to be seen as no longer, and I think they're recognizing they are no longer insurgents, but they are now the actual government. And that is hard to do. And they recognize we're going to need the help of the entire international community to make this thing go. And so I think right now we're looking at a nation that simply is learning how to walk in this realm of diplomacy, which has always been there, but we've pretty much sat it to the side because we've pumped trillions of dollars into our military to be able to lead on all of these issues. And so now we're finding our footing on, it's like writing with your right hand. If you're right-handed, everyone knows what it's like to use your right hand. But if you have to somehow switch over to your left hand is a little bit weaker. And so sometimes you may be unsure of how to use it, but you have to learn how. And that's what the United States is doing right now. It is learning how to use its left hand. It does not mean that that hand is weak. That hand just has not been used. And so now it is putting it to use. And already we're seeing dividends from that new hand.
Yeah. I mean, Eric, you make such a fascinating point, and the way that you frame diplomacy, all of the diplomats are cheering you, by the way.
I'm not on the payroll, by the way.
We'd love to be on the payroll, but we're journalists. We're not. I mean, it really is true. I mean, it has been, we have this knee-jerk reaction to use the military. And, you know, and the military is almost guided in this kind of sunk cost fallacy mentality, I put it, you know, of we've already invested the trillions of dollars. We've lost thousands of lives. We have to keep going. And I think what Joe Biden did was say, enough, you know, we cannot keep going. This will not turn, you know, on the dime. This will not turn in another 10 years. You know, as you said, we do continue to have leverage. You do not hold $9 billion worth of a country's reserves and think you don't have leverage. Now, that's not to simplify the situation, because how do you use that leverage without creating an even worse humanitarian catastrophe? That is something that has bedeviled, you know, both Republican and Democratic administrations. So it's not an easy solution. But, you know, even this recent evacuation, and you know, U.S. officials have stressed it's not an evacuation. It's you know, safe passage, or the normal passage out of the country. I don't know if you could define it as normal, but even then, that Qatari flight that left, there was another flight that came in from I believe Doha with humanitarian aid. I mean, there is zero doubt that they're, you know, letting some people go in order to let some aid flow. And the Taliban have all the guns, but you know, what you hope is working in Afghanistan's favor is, as you said, now they have to actually govern, not just buy the gun. And if anything that we have given the Afghans over the last 20 years is, you hope that they have had this taste of freedom, especially the women, and we've seen these brave women and men joining them in these protests, that they will not go back to the medieval rule that was prior to 9/11. It's a lot expecting, you know, a country to rise up against people that are cruel and have all the weapons. You know, so I don't know how optimistic you can be that that will happen. But, you know, I think these are important points. I mean, and the point is, going forward, so far, the Taliban, as you said, have sought international recognition. I don't think anyone is naive enough to think that they're going to say, hey, little girls, go to school, take your burqa off. You know, sure, journalists, do some free reporting. You know, I think everyone has a hugely skeptical mindset, justifiably so, about it. But it is clear that they are aware that they are going to need that money and that support to prevent an uprising, that this is not the 1990s. I think they still have connections, strong connections to Al-Qaeda. And I think it does bring up the question, what will the Biden administration do if we start to see a resurgence of Al-Qaeda? I personally think that there could be a military strike. I think at that point, the Biden administration will have a strong response. You know, and I think, Eric, you brought up of how this has all fallen on Biden's lap. I think too, one of the things, and by the way, I love the circus analogy. I mean, it's almost like we can take a breath over the last few months of covering actual news, other than, you know, hiring and firings and what Fox News is saying and what Twitter is saying. It's almost has left some journalists in this daily, what's the daily drama?
Right. And
that's not what Biden plays. He is refreshingly boring, and he thinks long term. He is strategic, and he has a very set mindset. I think people don't give him credit enough for his strong beliefs, and perhaps that's a factor of his age. But this is the other thing that, you know, and I don't know what you think, that has been overlooked in all of the commentary. Joe Biden, what he did was not surprising. He, in a sense, was very much the original America First president. I mean, he has not advocated for foreign entanglements. He is also the only president who had a child serve in a war. And I think that is very important to bring up, because we don't know what that feels like to have your son serve in a war and possibly get a phone call that he was killed. I think that has framed the president's thinking more than we give him credit for. Mm-hmm. I think Joe Biden has always been clear that his focus is the American soldiers. He does not want, as much as I think he is empathetic, he's an empathetic person. I think he's empathetic to the women in Afghanistan. He has never made it a secret that that is not his duty. His duty is to ensure that not a single American soldier dies. And, you know, I think it was one of those things where a lot of media were almost, they knew it, but they were overlooking that is his guiding principle. And his decision on Afghanistan, whether the withdrawal could have been managed better, and I think it's no secret that it could have, that the end game, he never had any intentions of staying. He was never going to redo, you know, Donald Trump's negotiation agreement, however flawed it was, because he knew that if he did, the Taliban would then say, you've reneged on the agreement, which one of the only things was that they agreed not to attack US soldiers. And if he did that, then he knew that the Taliban would train their guns on American soldiers. And there was no way he was going to allow that. And so, I think this exit, we knew former President Trump wanted to get out of Afghanistan. I mean, he didn't want to be in Iraq. We knew that was part of his few beliefs, I'll say, that were consistent over the years. And so maybe in a way that clouded our vision, we didn't always see that was really also front and center for Joe Biden.
You know, I think there are a couple of things. One, again, Joe Biden is actually showing that government can work. We've seen it with COVID and how they have rolled out these vaccines, even though there are so many millions of Americans that still refuse to take the vaccine. But we have seen millions of people, almost 200 million Americans, have at least one shot. So we have seen how government can actually work and get shots in people's arms. Also, what we have seen is we have seen a commander-in-chief who's willing to stand up to the military-industrial complex and say, no, this will end, and this will end now. And again, this is a president who is exhibiting leadership. And you're right, you hit the nail on the head, Anna, that so many journalists either just do not fundamentally know who Joe Biden is, or simply just do not know what the man really stands for. Because if they knew him, they would know that this is someone who ran on ending the war in Afghanistan. He said he was going to do this. And so not only did he do it, but yes, those first 72 hours, maybe 96 hours were completely bungled. They were bad. And not only were they bad, because as a White House correspondent, I'm at the White House those first 72 hours, and he's nowhere in sight. And so you're thinking, this looks bad. Where the hell is the commander-in-chief? I'm like, this cannot get any worse. It felt Trumpian because it was
I was gonna say, we can't go back to Mar-a-Lago. We can't do that.
But that's what it felt like. But how quickly they were able to turn this around. I remember watching CNN's Clarissa Ward, who everyone has given kudos for, and she was saying, I don't know how they're going to get 50,000 people out of here in 2 weeks. Well, they managed to get 123,000 out. So again, what he showed, even though those first 72, 96 hours were bad, he showed government working. And even when 13 US soldiers were killed in that suicide bomb, government still worked. That is something that I think is, again, both refreshing and somewhat new for Americans to see that government can actually work and it can work for me. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we are seeing from this president. And again, when you're so used to covering the circus, you don't know what working or effectiveness looks like. And so I think we're in new territory right now. And so that's what makes Biden effective on this. And also, here's something that I think, while the US media may not applaud Joe Biden, the US policy community might not applaud Joe Biden. Someone who was both applauding and kicking Joe Biden right now is China. Because now Afghanistan becomes China's problem. It's no longer the US's problem. This is China's problem. And the concern is not, will Al-Qaeda become a resurgent terrorist organization and hit the United States, but will they look to the East? Will they look to China to actually begin to build their brand back up? So China, I'm sure, recognizes this was a master stroke by Joe Biden, but now he's created a major, major headache for us.
And you know, that is a refreshing take on it as well, because how many articles are you reading left and right, and think tank reports and punditry that this is now opened the way for China and Russia to gain influence? I do agree with the administration. Biden has been blunt. There is nothing more that China and Russia want than to bleed us dry. That's what Al-Qaeda wants. That's what terrorists want, is to entangle us and bleed us dry of blood and treasure. And in that sense, exactly, if Afghanistan becomes, more radicalized, let's say, because we already know there's a fundamentalist Islamic, regime now in place, that's on Russia's borders. It is certainly not in Russia's interests for the Taliban to go rogue. It is not in China's interest, considering their issues with the Uyghurs and their fears of radicalization there on their eastern border, for the Taliban to be radicalized. And as you say, it is their problem. It is all of our problems, but to say that we have opened up this magic window for Russia and China is, instantly taking this negative view. I agree with you. I don't think we've done China and Russia no favors. No favors with this. The other thing that we're constantly hearing, especially, just here inside the Beltway, is the questioning whether America has, because of this, lost its international standing, prestige, influence, if you will. I mean, again, Americans just have this short memory. If we can survive Vietnam, we survived Vietnam and the Cold War, and communism fell. Believe me, America is not going to just lose its influence for getting out of a war that was never going to be won. It really is genuinely, it's asinine to me, these comments that all of a sudden, because of this, America has no leverage on the international community. It makes no sense. And Biden has also made no secret that he will follow through on America's promises when it comes to allies. Believe me, if Germany were invaded, I don't think Biden would hesitate. If Ukraine were invaded, yes, he would. He believes in fundamental national interests. I don't know how many more times the man can say national security interests. And so to me, that is, every time I read these articles, every time I read the commentary, do I think America has lost its influence? That's absurd. No, I not at all. And if anything, as you were saying, if you start to show you have a functioning government, if you start to show you have an administration where it's not leaks left and right and hiring and firing, he respects government. He knows that it can work if you let it work. If you put people in charge who have some experience doing it. He is showing the world that if America can work despite this horrible divisions that we have been going through, that will make us a model of international leadership. We do not have the luxury of an authoritarian regime like Beijing. We have a messy democracy. If Biden can show that we can pass infrastructure, we can pass legislation, that we can move on and we can get past this pandemic, which is, I mean, you know, the task that, you know, the challenge that he was tasked with, you know, if we can show that, I don't want Afghanistan to fall off the radar again, because I want us to continue, hopefully quiet efforts to bring out the people that helped us. It is important. I don't like the collective amnesia that we often have with foreign policy. But at the same time, I understand there's a reason bread and butter issues matter. People's jobs matter. People's health matters. People don't want to die. Biden has an obligation to Americans to keep them alive, whether it's in a war or during a pandemic. And if he can succeed, I think all of these, you know, rhetorical arguments of, you know, oh, the US is diminished on the world stage, I don't buy him. I just don't buy him.
You know, I'm so glad you brought this up, because, and I wrote about this for a piece, when all hell was breaking loose with the withdrawal, the administration still sent Kamala Harris to Asia for her visit. And I think what that was for was to show US allies that we are with you, because we saw Secretary Austin go there. We saw Secretary Blinken there. We saw Ambassador Sherman was there. But now you are sending the second highest US official, the vice president. You are sending the vice president to Asia. And I think that was the president doubling down, saying, even in the midst of the trouble that we are having with this withdrawal from Afghanistan, we will not forget our allies, and we will stand firm to our commitments. I think that spoke volumes. And again, I think it was a masterstroke by this president that went under the radar, that people didn't see. But trust me, I think it was a success, the fact that he did send Kamala Harris to on that trip, and they didn't cancel that trip. I thought it was a masterstroke. It didn't get the attention that it should have, but it was an extremely effective sell to the US allies. And I think this is what the president is doing. And again, once again, we are seeing government work, as you said, in the midst of all of the chaos. Afghanistan, a pandemic. We've got wildfires out west. We've got hurricanes, you know, in the south and east, but still government, US government is working. Shots are getting in people's arms. Our allies are actually being touched. Do you know, during the 4 years of the Trump administration, we ignored Asia, completely ignored it. And now
for all of the rhetoric about China, we ignored allies altogether.
We ignored our allies. No vice president, Pence never went on these types of visits. So I think what we're seeing here is government working. And as part of the media landscape, we don't know what that looks like. And so therefore, we don't know how to adequately cover it, is I think what's happening.
And Eric, that is such an excellent point that I myself had overlooked. And if anything, the media covered it, some of it with derision, as look what's happening in Afghanistan. Why are you saying, you know, almost in the sense of, you know, you see your vice president is not important to you because you're just sending her off to Asia in the midst of this debacle in Afghanistan. That was how a lot of commentary viewed it, as you know, Kamala Harris, this is how she's being sidelined. She's just going for a photo op in Asia. And I don't believe Biden thought of it that way. Like you said, no. I think it was very calculated because he understands the power of diplomacy, the power of competence, and of saying, here is my vice president, here is my defense secretary. I'm not just going to talk about China, but I'm going to look at the other side instead of confusing allies or let's be honest, just pissing them off with arguments that you know don't need to be started. It's this quiet building of alliances, of a strategic long-term vision that somebody who has been in government for decades understands. And yeah, a lot in the media dismissed that trip as yet another, oh, he's just, giving her something to do. That I agree with you. That's not what it was. It was very strategic. It was purposeful, and it was intelligent not to cancel it, because the message here is there are going to be a lot of problems, but Biden is not going to get distracted by every tweet every other day, not even every other day, every 2 hours. It is refreshing. He is going to stay focused. It's not to say he's not going to mess up. It's not to say he's not going to encounter monumental challenges. 80 million haven't, don't agree with science, but he is laser focused, and he has been very clear, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's, and the vaccination thing, I also don't want to, go off on too much of a tangent, that people are like, well, Biden should have been this forceful, months ago. If he had, he would have had a backlash. He had faith that, people had some common sense. Unfortunately, you get to a point, you see where Biden takes an incremental approach. He probably did in the beginning by using more education, influence, rewards, everything. He got the group that was going to be convinced to be vaccinated, and now you're left with the people that will not be convinced no matter what, even if they're on a ventilator in an ICU. So now he's taking a more forceful approach. I agree with you. I think the media a lot of times has really missed the ball with Biden, and I think the next step of this, again, as much as I'm glad we did this show, because I don't want Afghanistan to fall by the wayside. It is an important country, but I think we need to be, as you said, clear-eyed, just as Joe Biden is, about what our interests there are. But, we also have to realize the next few weeks will be hugely critical to the nation. And again, as much as, tomorrow will be a solemn event, 9/11 is of course not anything that should be forgotten. It reshaped all of our lives. It reshaped the entire world. Again, Joe Biden has not made it a secret. His presidency, his agenda is his Build Back America Better program. Trillions of dollars that could reshape American lives. And in spite of Afghanistan, he continues to be laser focused on that. And we will see, as you know, in the coming weeks, this is going to be a legislative brawl among Democrats themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
But none of it veers from his focus and belief that it is all about American interests and doing the best for, whether it's the pandemic, paid family leave. This has always been, as you said, it's not a lot of secrets to Joe Biden. We all act kind of surprised, but he's been very clear for decades with his priorities. So on that note, thank you so much, everyone, for hearing all of our,
for listening to our diatribe.
It's I hope it was helpful. There's just so much to say, and you know me, I could go on, but it is actually getting to be like,
oh yeah, we can do this. We could easily do this for another hour. We could easily do this for another
night. Yeah, right. This is the Friday night fun. But on that note, we kind of segued into infrastructure. That is going to be. That's going to be a whole other battle.
That's going to be, that's a fight for the ages. And we're going to, that's where, and I can't wait till September 29th, or is it September 29th? Yeah, when we really have this conversation, because that's when you're really going to see this battle between progressives and moderates. And progressives have been like chained. But now you are going to see progressives unchained. And I think it's going to be ugly, but it's going to be necessary, because you're going to see a fight and a battle over ideas about not where the party should go, but where the country should go. And we're going to see that live in living color. It's going to be exciting, because again, it's democracy at play, it's democracy at work, and it's messy, but this is how it works. And this is what makes the system work. And this is what makes it so great.
Exactly. And just for our viewers or listeners, even before we got on camera, we were already sitting here debating what was going to happen at the end of September. So I mean, we can't wait. I mean, come on, political junkie, you cannot wait. It's just going to be, I mean, everything: infrastructure, the massive social spending package, government funding, disaster aid, and the debt ceiling limit. I mean, whew. So on that note, we are going to be covering it all. It's going to be a live show because there's no other way to do that, because whatever we do might be out of date the next day, and it's going to be right and crunch time. So we hope you're able to join us. We are going to be on Wednesday, September 29th. We think 2 o'clock. So we've committed ourselves.
We've committed ourselves.
I know, we're committed. Yeah. We're committed. Yeah. And we are just going to, we're going to be like the boxing commentators.
Exactly. You're going to be like the announcer. I'm going to be the play-by-play man.
There we go. It's going to be a show, folks. It's going to be a show. Is. Yeah. So, and on that note, thank you for joining us on this show. We really appreciate it. Please stay tuned. You can always get more information on our website at watchdiplomat.com. You can also watch all of the episodes. And thank you, as always, Eric. It's always really for agreeing with me. That's going to be good. We'll see, though, in September. I think we have some differing opinions, so that's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm going to be right, but of course.
We'll see. We'll see. And we hope you will see as well. So again, thank you everyone for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
360. Take care.